British Columbia is a wonderland of mountains, forests, tumbling waterfalls, mountain streams and lakes of rare beauty. Slocum Lake, situated in the heart of the Selkirk Mountains, is a gem not surpassed elsewhere in the province for loveliness. 30 miles long and scarcely 2 miles wide, its deep waters are flanked on either side by high mountains, whose melting snows feed many streams that tumble down their rocky way through a heavy growth of forest. Along its shores, the forest gives way to walls of moss-covered rock that drop precipitously into the water, with here and there a conifer perched precariously on some narrow ledge, where, in the spring, masses of wildflowers colour every crevice. September is a delightful month to climb the adjacent peaks. Then the days are cool and the flies have disappeared, two great essentials to enjoyable mountaineering. Gold and crimson slopes above the forest urge one to take advantage of the few weeks left before all will be buried under snow. The middle of last September I started with a party for the new Denver Glacier, the highest point on the lakeshore, reaching nearly 9,000 feet in elevation. Long before daylight, we met at the lakeshore and crossed in a launch by starlight. Safely on the other side, we adjusted our packs and started up the steep trail that wound through the dense forest. Gradually, the cold grey light of dawn filtered through the trees, and after an hour or so it was possible to distinguish plants along the trail. When we skirted a shoulder of rock clothed in saffron and green, I longed to stop. For here, one early spring morning, I had found Neckera menziesi, Bartramia uderi, Anacolia menziesi, Amphidium laponicum, and a little farther on a few plants of Dicranella crispa. But the way of the mosser is hard, so I had to push along or be left hopelessly behind. As the trail grew steeper, we moved slowly enough so that I was able to snatch bits of moss, much as a pony climbing a trail snatches bits of grass when his rider becomes listless. Beneath the trees and encroaching on our trail were masses of Hylocomium proliferum, Rhytidium robustum, Rhytidiodelphus laureus and other forest mosses, with here and there miniature forests of Lycopodium complanatum. And standing stiffly above them were the seed pods of the rattlesnake plantain and the various pyrolas that beautify our woods in the spring. Beside a log, all velvety with Dicranum strictum, was a tall clump of Dicranum undulatum in perfect fruit. Among the hepatics on the log were brownish bristles, all that was left of a colony of Buxbaumia, probably piperi. Part of a telltale capsule was all that remained of the fruit. At last we were out of the forest, for a time climbing a steep hillside clothed with Polytrichum pilliferum and P. juniperinum, with here and there a rock covered with Grimmia apocarpa and Rhacomitrium heterosticum, and on a rock in the shade of some bushes I snatched a bit of Pteryginandrum filiform. Suddenly the sun burst upon us, and the whole aspect was changed. The larches on the opposite slope were like pyramids of gold among the conifers, and the shadows crept slowly down the hillside until at last all the world was bathed in sunshine. As we proceeded, the soft murmur of the stream below gave way to the rhythmic tumbling of a waterfall that grew louder until we were finally above it, having had only a glimpse of it on our way. Here we stopped to rest and fortify ourselves with food. I longed to scramble through the tangle of bushes where so many beautiful things were hidden, but there was no time to explore if we were to gain our objective. The next 2 miles the trail does not rise at all, and it is refreshing to walk beside the noisy stream winding its way through an old cedar forest that has escaped the ravages of fire. The Devil's Club, with its huge leaves and great clusters of red berries, flourishes at its best here and lends to the forest a tropical air. Miniums and bryums grow in profusion beside the half-swampy trail, and in one place I found a philanotis that turned out to be Tomentella, Aulecomnium palustre and sphagnum grew in the damper spots, and everywhere there was a rank growth of ferns. Overhanging the stream, the red-stemmed dogwood in dull red leaves was adorned with opalescent berries, and the glossy leaves of the mountain rhododendron were turning orange and yellow. Decaying logs and stumps were green with Dicranum strictum, Dicranum fuscescens, Stereodon circinalis, Hepatix, and small ferns. Huge rocks were hidden under masses of Hylocomium proliferum and Dicranum. Again we left the forest, this time with regret, for the day was getting hot and it was necessary to cross a slide, a frightful mixture of rocks, logs, and flattened alders. After a hard scramble over and under logs and through the alders, our troubles were not yet over, for we next faced a steep hillside covered with fireweed, higher than our heads. Some of the seed pods were all feathery, and the others were in that state where the least disturbance causes them to discharge their seeds. As we charged through this, a cloud of cotton filled the air, almost smothering us. At last, someone thought of tying our handkerchiefs about our heads, and we managed to get through to be amply repaid for our discomfort on the other side, for here we stepped into a garden all glowing red with low bushes laden with large black berries brushed with silver dust. It was a huckleberry patch at last, and here we sat and refreshed ourselves with the fruit that men and bears alike consider the greatest delicacy. From the condition of some of the bushes, it was plain to be seen that a bear had been there before us. Another short grind and we arrived on the flat below the glacier, where the trees are dwarfed and soon give way to the characteristic shrubby growth of that altitude. Lunch and a cup of strong tea put new life into a weary body, and at 1 o'clock a start was made for the glacier. I had been on top before, and I had no intention of climbing the glacier because moss never grows on ice, and I was making of this an expedition for mosses. So I climbed to the foot of the glacier with the party and left them, much to their disappointment, and for the next 4 hours leisurely explored the streams and rocks for these small plants. In the water and on the banks of the cold, deep stream that issued from the glacier, I found such plants as Hygrohypnum molle, H. palustre, H. drepanocladus aquaticus, D. fluitans, D. revolvens, Philonotis calcarea, Anthelia juratscana, Adulacea, Gymnometrium varians, Jungermannia cordifolia, Lophosia ventricosa, Marsupella sparsifolia, Scapania subalpina, and others more common. On boulders and rocks were Rhacomitrium fasciculare, R. canescens, Grimmia pulvinata, Dicranum starke, Pseudolescea radicosa, and P. atrovirens, and perhaps many more that I did not find. My bags were then full, so I scrambled up the moraine in search of rutile crystals which I had found some years before embedded in the granite. I found beautiful specimens, but was unable to disengage any of them from their matrix. Here and there were slabs of rock beautifully scored from glacial action. Rock rabbits sat at the doorways of their homes and watched me with great curiosity, and once the shrill whistle of a hoary marmot close at hand startled me. Finally, I stood upon the ridge where I could look across at the vast expanse of mountains, ridge on ridge, rugged pinnacles of rock at first, then finally lost in the purple haze of distance. At my right was the glacier, and at my left an unscalable buttress. Turning around, I saw Slocum Lake, like a silver ribbon more than 5,000 feet below me, and another sea of mountains beyond. I was content to sit in the sharp September breeze and await my friends. At last I saw them making their way rapidly down the glacier, mere specks in the distance. They reached me at 5 o'clock. We made tea at our former lunching place and started on at once, but were overtaken by darkness before we were halfway down. We had candles and made lanterns out of tin cans that we had stored below for that purpose. Arriving at last at the lakeshore, footsore and weary, we built fires to signal for our boat, and after a short wait were soon on the homeward stretch.